No one dared to stop the billionaire beating his pregnant wife, until single dad Janitor stepped in. The night air hung heavy with secrets as Marcus Chen pushed his cleaning cart down the 15th floor corridor of the Grandeur Hotel. The wheels squeaked softly against the marble, a sound that had become the soundtrack of his life for the past 5 years. At 42 years old, with hands roughened by bleach and labor, Marcus had learned to move through this world of wealth like a ghost. Invisible, unnoticed, irrelevant. That's exactly how the rich like their help. The clock on the wall read 11:43 p.m. 4 more hours until his shift ended. 4 more hours until he could go home to his 7-year-old daughter Emma, sleeping peacefully under the worn blankets he'd bought at a thrift store. 4 more hours of pretending that mopping floors for minimum wage was enough to build a life on. But tonight, everything was about to change. Marcus had just finished cleaning room 1502 when he heard it, a sound that made his blood freeze in his veins. It started as a muffled cry, then escalated into a scream that pierced through the hotel's expensive soundproofing. "No, Richard, please, think about the baby." The voice belonged to Victoria Ashford, wife of billionaire real estate mogul Richard Ashford. Marcus had seen her around the hotel dozens of times. She was different from the other wealthy guests, always polite, always kind. She'd asked about Emma once, remembered her name the next time they met. In a world where people like Marcus were furniture, Victoria had seen him as human. Another crash echoed from room 1506, the sound of glass shattering, a woman sobbing. "You think you can disrespect me? Make me look like a fool in front of my business partners?" Richard Ashford's voice boomed through the door, slurred with expensive whiskey and cheap rage. Marcus stood frozen in the hallway, his mop dripping water onto the pristine floor. His heart hammered against his ribs like a prisoner, trying to escape. Every survival instinct he'd honed over 5 years of scraping by screamed at him to walk away. "Mind your business. Keep your head down. Don't get involved." Richard Ashford wasn't just rich, he was powerful, $8 billion powerful. The kind of man who owned judges, bought politicians, and destroyed anyone who crossed him. Marcus had seen it happen before. A valet who reported Ashford's drunk driving had lost his job, his apartment, and ended up homeless within a month. A maid who'd witnessed Ashford's affair had been deported back to Honduras, leaving her 2 children behind. The system protected men like Richard Ashford. It crushed men like Marcus Chen. Another scream tore through the hallway, followed by a sickening thud. "Please, the baby! You're hurting the baby!" Victoria's desperate plea shattered something inside Marcus's chest. Suddenly, he wasn't standing in a luxury hotel corridor anymore. He was back in the hospital 3 years ago, holding Emma's tiny hand while the doctors told him there was nothing more they could do. His wife Sarah had died because one drunk driver ran a red light and society shrugged. Another tragedy, another statistic, another person the system failed to protect. Sarah had made him promise something that night, her voice barely a whisper. "Marcus, promise me you'll teach Emma that courage matters, that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs you everything." Marcus looked down at his hands, these ordinary, calloused, working-class hands, and made a choice. He dropped his mop and ran toward room 1506. His fist hammered against the door with a force that surprised even him. "Hotel security, open this door immediately." The sounds inside stopped. For 3 heartbeats there was only silence. Marcus held his breath. He wasn't security, he wasn't anyone, he was a janitor lying through his teeth, with a daughter at home who needed him, about to throw away everything on a principle that the world had. Proven didn't matter, but damn it, it mattered to him. The door swung open violently, and Richard Ashford stood there like a monument to arrogance. 6'2", broad-shouldered, wearing a shirt that cost more than Marcus's monthly rent. His face was flushed red with alcohol and rage, his eyes blazing with the entitled fury of a man who'd never been told no in his entire life. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Richard's voice was a low growl, dangerous and dismissive. Behind him, Marcus could see Victoria collapsed on the floor near the bed. Her designer maternity dress was torn at the shoulder. Her face, God, her face was already swelling with bruises. Blood trickled from her split lip. Her hands were wrapped protectively around her pregnant belly, and her body shook with terrified sobs. Something ancient and primal surged through Marcus's veins, the same instinct that had driven men to stand against tyranny throughout history, the same force that made ordinary people do extraordinary things. "I'm someone who won't let you hurt her anymore," Marcus said, his voice steadier than his trembling hands. Richard laughed, a sound like breaking glass, sharp and cruel. "You? You're a goddamn janitor, a nobody. Do you have any idea who I am?" "I own half this city. I golf with the mayor. I have senators on speed dial." He stepped closer, using his height to intimidate. "I could buy and sell your pathetic life 1,000 times over." "Maybe," Marcus said quietly. "But you can't buy the fact that what you're doing is wrong. Wrong." Richard's face twisted with contempt. "You want to lecture me about morality? You clean toilets for a living. You're nothing. You're the help, and the help doesn't get opinions." Marcus felt the sting of those words. The casual cruelty of a man who saw entire classes of people as disposable. But he'd been underestimated his entire life. Being invisible had taught him that real strength didn't announce itself. "Victoria!" Marcus called out, not taking his eyes off Richard. "Can you stand?" "Don't you dare talk to my wife," Richard snarled. "She's my property. This is my marriage. And you're trespassing." "She's a human being," Marcus shot back. "And that baby she's carrying deserves a chance to be born without its father beating its mother to death." Richard's face went purple with rage. "That's it. I'm done with you." He pulled out his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer and the police. You just assaulted me by forcing your way into my room. That's breaking and entering. Battery. I'll have you arrested, prosecuted, and thrown in jail. And while you're rotting in a cell, who's going to take care of your daughter?" "Emma, right, 7 years old, already lost her mother?" The mention of Emma sent ice through Marcus's veins. Of course Richard had information on the staff. Of course he'd use a child as a weapon. "Social services will take her," Richard continued, his smile vicious. "Foster care. You know what happens to kids in the system, don't you? And all because you decided to play hero." Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He thought about Emma waking up to find him gone, thought about her crying for a father who'd never come home, thought about her growing up believing her dad had abandoned her. But then he looked at Victoria on the floor, this woman who'd shown him kindness in a cruel world, carrying a baby that would be born into violence if someone didn't stop it tonight. And Marcus realized this was exactly the kind of moment Sarah had meant. This was the test. Would he teach Emma through his actions that doing the right thing only mattered when it was convenient? Or would he show her that courage meant standing up even when everything was on the line? "Do what you have to do," Marcus said, his voice firm. "But I'm not moving until she's safe." Richard's eyes narrowed with calculated malice. "Fine. Have it your way." He suddenly lunged forward, throwing a punch aimed at Marcus's face. But Richard Ashford had grown up with personal trainers and country club tennis. Marcus Chen had grown up in the Bronx, had served 2 years in the Marines before his honorable discharge, and had worked construction for a decade before an injury forced him into janitorial work. Marcus saw the punch coming from a mile away. He sidestepped smoothly, caught Richard's wrist mid-swing, and used the man's own momentum to spin him around. Within seconds, Marcus had Richard's arm twisted behind his back, the bigger man's face pressed against the wall. "I said I won't let you hurt her," Marcus repeated through gritted teeth. Richard struggled, cursing, threatening, his entitled rage boiling over. "I'll destroy you. I'll destroy everything you love. You'll regret this for the rest of your miserable life." "Victoria, please try to get to the door," Marcus called out. But Victoria was frozen in shock, her body trembling, unable to process what was happening. The commotion had finally attracted attention. Doors opened along the hallway. Guests peered out, wealthy people in silk pajamas and expensive robes, their faces a mixture of shock and voyeuristic curiosity. And crucially, their phones were out, recording everything. "Someone call the actual security," a woman shouted. "Call the police," another voice added. "Oh my God, is that Richard Ashford?" The hotel manager arrived first, her face going pale as she recognized the scene. Behind her, 3 security guards rushed forward, their expressions caught between protocol and disbelief. "This man attacked me," Richard roared, still pinned against the wall. "He forced his way into my room and assaulted me. I want him arrested immediately." "That's not what happened," came a shaky voice from the doorway. Victoria had managed to pull herself up using the bed frame. Her bruised face told its own story. He saved my life. My husband was beating me." The janitor stopped him. The guests in the hallway murmured, their phones still recording. In the age of social media, truth traveled faster than money could bury it. "Mr. Chen, you can let him go now," the head of security said gently. "A man named Raymond who'd worked with Marcus for 3 years. We've got this situation under control." Marcus released Richard, his hands shaking with adrenaline. Richard immediately straightened his expensive shirt, his face contorted with rage and humiliation. "You just made the biggest mistake of your pathetic life," Richard hissed at Marcus. Within 10 minutes, the 15th floor was chaos. Richard's lawyers arrived in tailored suits, already threatening lawsuits and demanding arrests. The police showed up, taking statements. Paramedics carefully examined Victoria, documenting her injuries with photos and gentle questions. Hotel management tried to control the situation, while guests continued recording, uploading, sharing. Marcus stood against the wall, watching it all unfold, wondering if he'd just destroyed his entire life for 3 minutes of courage. A police officer approached him, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes. "Mr. Chen, we need your statement about what happened tonight." Marcus told her everything, his voice quiet but steady. As he spoke, he watched Victoria being loaded onto a stretcher, her hand still protectively cradling her pregnant belly. Their eyes met across the chaos, and she mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Richard's lead lawyer, a shark in a $3,000 suit, stepped forward. "Officer, my client wishes to press charges against this man for assault, breaking and entering, and harassment. Mr. Ashford is the victim here." "Funny," the police officer said dryly, looking at her notes. "Because we have 17 eyewitnesses and about 30 videos showing a pregnant woman with facial injuries saying the janitor saved her life. We also have hotel staff reporting previous noise complaints from this room. So maybe save the victim narrative." Richard's face went from red to purple. "Do you know who I am? I'll have your badge. Yeah, the officer interrupted. "You're rich and powerful. We get it. But domestic violence is domestic violence, and we have enough evidence to arrest you, Mr. Ashford. Turn around, please." The hallway went silent as Richard Ashford, billionaire, real estate mogul, untouchable titan of industry, was handcuffed and read his Miranda rights. His lawyers immediately surrounded him, already making phone calls, but the damage was done. As Richard was led away, he locked eyes with Marcus one final time. The look was pure hatred, a promise of vengeance. Marcus knew his troubles were just beginning. The next morning, Marcus woke up to Emma climbing into his bed, her small hand shaking his shoulder. "Daddy, why are there people outside our apartment?" Marcus's heart sank. He grabbed his phone from the nightstand and immediately regretted it. 247 missed calls, 1,843 text messages. His inbox was exploded. He carefully looked out the window. A crowd of reporters had gathered outside their modest apartment building, cameras and microphones ready. The story had gone viral. Janitor hero saves pregnant billionaire wife was trending on every social media platform. The videos from the hotel hallway had been viewed millions of times. News outlets across the country were covering it. Marcus's face was everywhere. His phone rang. It was his boss at the hotel. "Marcus, I need you to come in immediately. We need to talk." This was it. The consequences Richard had promised. Marcus would be fired, blacklisted, destroyed. "Emma, baby, stay with Mrs. Rodriguez next door for a bit, okay?" Marcus said, already getting dressed. "Are you in trouble, Daddy?" Emma's eyes were wide with worry. Marcus knelt down and took her small hands in his. "Sometimes doing the right thing looks like trouble at first, but I promise no matter what happens, we're going to be okay." He kissed her forehead and headed out, navigating through the crowd of reporters, shouting questions he couldn't answer. When Marcus arrived at the Grandeur Hotel, He expected to be escorted to HR for termination. Instead, he was brought to the executive conference room, a place he'd only ever seen while cleaning it late at night. Inside, he found not just the hotel manager, but Victoria Ashford, her lawyer, and several people he didn't recognize. Victoria stood up carefully, one hand on her pregnant belly. Her face was still swollen and bruised, but her eyes were clear and determined. "Mr. Chen," she said, her voice stronger than he'd expected, "I needed to see you in person, to thank you for saving my life and my baby's life." Marcus felt his throat tighten. I couldn't walk away." "But you could have," Victoria said softly. "For months people knew. My friends saw the bruises and said nothing. Richard's business partners witnessed his temper and looked away. Hotel staff had seen signs before and stayed silent. Everyone was too afraid of Richard's power, his money, his revenge." Her voice cracked. "Everyone except you." She gestured to her lawyer, who handed Marcus an envelope. "This is a thank you, but it's also something else. It's an acknowledgement that your courage gave me mine." Marcus opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $75,000. "I can't accept this," Marcus whispered, stunned. "You absolutely can," Victoria said firmly. "You risked everything for a stranger, your job, your safety, your daughter's future. Emma deserves a father who doesn't have to work himself to death just to survive." The hotel manager cleared her throat. "Marcus, the hotel would also like to offer you a new position. Director of Safety and Wellness. Full benefits, $85,000 annual salary, normal hours. Your job would be training our staff to recognize and respond to situations like what you handled last night." Marcus couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. One of the unfamiliar people stood up, a woman in an elegant business suit. "Mr. Chen, my name is Patricia Williams. I'm the CEO of the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We'd like to work with you to develop a training program for service industry workers. People in positions like yours are often the only witnesses to abuse. Teaching them to act could save countless lives." Another person spoke up, a man with warm eyes. "And I'm David Chen, no relation, from the Chen Foundation. We'd like to establish a scholarship fund in your name for children of single parents pursuing education." The room blurred as tears filled Marcus's eyes. He'd thought his life was over. Instead, one act of courage was creating ripples he couldn't have imagined. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Richard Ashford's carefully constructed empire began to crumble. The videos from that night had destroyed his reputation. Investors pulled out. Business partners severed ties. And most devastating for a man who valued image above all else, he became a pariah in the social circles he'd once dominated. More women came forward, a former secretary, a girlfriend from college, a maid from another hotel. Richard's pattern of abuse had been an open secret for years, enabled by money and fear. The trial became a media sensation. Marcus testified, his quiet strength on the stand contrasting sharply with Richard's entitled rage. Victoria testified too, finally free to tell her truth. Marcus watched from the gallery as the jury returned their verdict, guilty on multiple counts of domestic violence, assault, and endangering a child. Richard Ashford was sentenced to 4 years in prison. As Richard was led away in handcuffs, he looked back at Marcus one last time. But this time, there was no hatred in his eyes, just the empty realization that his money and power had finally met something they couldn't buy or bully, basic human decency. 6 months later, Marcus stood on a small stage in the hotel's grand ballroom. Emma beside him in her best dress. He'd been invited to speak at a conference on service industry workers and social responsibility. Victoria sat in the front row, her baby daughter. Grace Marcus Ashford, named after the man who saved them both, sleeping peacefully in her arms. Marcus looked out at the crowd of hotel workers, security guards, janitors, housekeepers, people like him who spent their lives invisible. "I'm not a hero," Marcus began, his voice steady. "The night I knocked on that door, I was terrified. I knew I could lose everything. I knew a powerful man could destroy my life, and I almost walked away." He paused, looking down at Emma, who gazed up at him with pure love and pride. But I realized something important. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to do what's right even when you're afraid, even when it costs you, even when the world tells you it's not your problem. He gestured to the audience. Every single one of you has more power than you think. You're in rooms where deals are made, where people reveal who they really are when they think no one important is watching. But you're important. You matter. And sometimes, you're the only person who can help. A hotel maid in the third row raised her hand. But Mr. Chen, what if we get fired? What if we can't afford to be heroes? Marcus nodded. That's the real question, isn't it? And I won't lie to you, doing the right thing can cost you. But I'll tell you what I learned. Staying silent has a cost too. It costs you your soul. It costs someone their safety. It costs children their mother or father. And sometimes it costs lives. He took a breath. I'm fortunate. Things worked out for me. But even if they hadn't, even if I'd been fired, blacklisted, destroyed, I would still have made the same choice. Because I can look my daughter in the eye and tell her that when someone needed help, her father didn't turn away. The room erupted in applause. After the conference, Victoria approached Marcus, baby Grace sleeping against her shoulder. I have something to tell you, Victoria.